Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Before we get started, as always, remember to click subscribe below and then click the little notification bell so that you get a notification every time I post a video. Remember to hit the thumbs up and leave a comment afterward. So today what I'm going to talk about is some observations that I made when I was traveling in Kenya on my safari. Now I've already made the videos about visiting the Maasai village and kissing a giraffe, which are both things that I did while I was in Kenya. I will probably be making some other videos as far as the safari portion of my trip, but I would also like to make a video about just things that I observed, things that were maybe surprising or different than the United States. I also made a video of my experiences in Ecuador, things that really surprised me. So I'm going to be doing the same thing hopefully for everywhere that I go. So I've got some notes on my phone and I will just be talking about some of my observations. So one of the first things I noticed, we landed in the airport and we went outside to meet our driver, which was pre-arranged. And there were so many people that were wanting to drive us and wanting to get work. And when you land in an airport like in the United States, I don't really have that experience. There's not really people all around clamoring to get your business. So that tells me that a lot of people, it's good that they want to work for their money, but it also tells me that a lot of people really need work and really need to make a couple dollars. And so we ended up telling all the people, sorry, we already have a driver arranged. But I mean, everyone was understanding once we told them that we already had a driver. They didn't bug us. But I just thought it was really interesting because that's not something that happens here. And then we get in the vehicle with our driver and we start driving away from the airport down the street, and almost immediately, like, you see people just selling items in the middle of the street, literally just holding like baskets or like a fruit or just random items, mostly like fruits and some edible things that they're really trying to sell you. And if your vehicle stops, they'll try to lean in and sell something to you. That didn't happen to our vehicle, but I did see it happen to some other vehicles. And I mean, it's also kind of sad that people need to make their living that way, but that's just, you know, something that really stood out to me. And it wasn't super surprising just based on documentaries I've watched and everything, but it was a little bit surprising because we were in the capital city in Nairobi, Kenya, and I thought that maybe the capital city would be a little bit more built up and a little bit more, and like a little bit less of that going on. I don't know. Another thing that I noticed is that, and I don't know if this is common, but when we were driving around the country from park to park during our safari, I mean, we're in the vehicle 5-6 hours at a time in between parks when we were switching from one to the other. And a lot of times people were literally chopping grass by hand. And I don't mean down on their hands and knees with a pair of scissors. I mean people just standing up with a big blade looking thing and just swinging it back and forth, chopping grass. And I didn't take any photos or videos because I thought that was really rude and disrespectful. Like, how would you feel if somebody showed up at your work or your school and started just like recording you doing your job? Like, I just think that's weird. But it was definitely something out of the ordinary and definitely something that I haven't seen before. So there's that. One time we stopped at a couple little gift shops on our way in between the parks. Obviously 6-hour drive is a long time, so for us to get out and stretch our legs and for our driver as well. And when we were at one of them, a guy came up to us and handed us $5 US and asked if he could have 500 shillings. And the exchange rate really is 100 shillings equals $1. And sometimes I think they take American dollars because it's better than not making a sale at all. And because it's an easy exchange, 1 to 100 is very simple. And then maybe they just like ask other people, other tourists, to change into shillings. What I did notice though is that at the actual currency exchange locations, they exchange your bills for you, like your 10s, your 20s, at a rate of 1 to 100. But your 1s and your 5s, they don't exchange them at a rate of 1 to 100. They exchange it at a rate of 50 cents. And I thought that was really weird because the exchange rate really is 1 to 100. I guess they just don't really want to bother changing people's smaller bills. I don't know. But it was a way for him to make a sale by taking $5 US, and then he was able to ask another tourist, who was us, if we could give him a 500 shilling bill and he would give us $5 US. So we did that. Another thing to note about currency, very important, is that the currency exchange centers only take the updated United States money. So I had an outdated 20 with like the small picture of Andrew Jackson, and they wouldn't take it to exchange it for us, I guess because they're afraid of fraud or something. So they will only take the updated notes, American notes from the year 2000 and later. So that's something that's definitely really important, and it could have been bad, but just like be aware of that. Go through your bills that you're bringing with you to exchange or whatever, and don't bring anything from before the year 2000. And remember, you're not gonna get a good exchange rate on your 1s and your 5s. The electricity was really, I guess, still kind of a problem in Kenya. So the thing is, I guess in the developed areas in Nairobi, like where our driver lived and everything, I think everyone has access to electricity if you live in a regular apartment, but you still are out like an hour or two every day or something. I think that's what he said anyway. And at the camps where we stayed, there was actually almost no electricity wired there, and everything was run off generators. And on top of that, there was no electricity inside of your tent or your cabin or whatever during the day. So there were blackout hours from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. or something like that. And it really didn't affect us because we were out on a safari game drive the whole time anyway during most of those hours. So it wasn't a big deal, but we also weren't able to leave our phones behind and leave them charging or anything like that. So definitely something to keep in mind. Make sure you charge everything overnight. Make sure maybe you have an extra battery pack that you keep charged if you really need to charge something during the time that there's the power blackout. Just be aware that not everything is like it is in the United States, and also make sure you bring a plug converter because they don't use the same types of plugs as the United States, or probably a lot of other countries. So just make sure you check on that. I mentioned this in my Ecuador video. I'm gonna mention it again here. The level of poverty, it's really different. It's to a different extent than the level of poverty in the United States. And I know there's homeless people. I know there's people who suffer. I know there's people who are hungry in the United States. But this just put it into a whole other perspective. Ecuador, and again in Kenya, not to diminish the troubles of the people who live in the United States or Europe and they are in the poverty threshold. The people in Kenya who are in the poverty threshold, I mean, they live in literal tin shacks, and that's their forever home. And again, this isn't to lessen or minimize people's suffering who sleep on a park bench in the United States or live in a tent community or something like that. I mean, this is permanent. This is generations of just poverty and living in literal tin shacks and not having access to water. I mean, not even being able to go to the YMCA for some water or a shower or anything like that. So, I mean, stuff like that is really eye-opening. And also, speaking of tin shacks, American consumerism is actually a little bit out of control. Like, companies are, it's crazy. I saw advertisements for Coca-Cola on tin shacks, literally in the middle of nowhere on the furthest away back road in between these safari parks. And it was just amazing to me how far companies and consumerism really take it, like just way out there. It was eye-opening. Speaking of water, I saw people on the side of the road literally gathering water from rain puddles on the side of the road and just scooping it up in bowls or whatever containers they had. And so again, I know I've said it a couple times, but just definitely eye-opening and really something that makes me really appreciate what I've got here in the United States and where I live. So something, you know, with all the systemic poverty and everything going on in Kenya, all of the little touristy shops that we stopped at along the way were allowed to use the bathroom, and we were allowed to use them for free, which was different than Ecuador, where we had to pay like 50 cents or something to be able to use a bathroom. And they were all complete toilets, like I'm used to in my house in the United States. And I didn't really expect that. There was one gas station that we stopped at, and the toilet was literally a hole in the ground. But other than that, they were all regular toilets I don't know if it's just because it's a type of place that they expect tourists to stop at, so they build it up a little bit for the tourists, and I'm not sure what it's like in the rest of the country in regular people's houses. I'm not sure because I didn't see that, but I just thought that was definitely interesting to note, in that they were free and they didn't charge money for it, and they didn't expect you to buy anything from their souvenirs. I mean, obviously they wanted you to, and they would show you around and encourage you, but they weren't annoying, and they were very friendly about it. So, I mean, this is common in, I guess, less developed countries where nothing is actually a price. So there's a lot of price haggling going on, and our tour guide driver gave us a heads up that when we stopped at these types of little shops or people were trying to sell you things, that nothing would have a price, and that you should counter offer them with a little bit less than half of what they asked you for. So for example, if they asked you for 1,000 shillings, which is $10, then you should counter with like 400 shillings, and they wouldn't be insulted. And they really weren't. I mean, a lot of them did try to drive a hard bargain, but at the end of the day, I also noticed that if you turned around and started walking away, they would call you back and they would drop their price dramatically. They wouldn't give it to you exactly for what you asked for, but they would give it to you for maybe 100 shillings more than you had asked for. So in that situation, if I said 400 and they said 800 and I said, no, that's okay, I don't really need it, and I turned around and start walking away, they would call me back and offer it for 500 or something. So that is something I noticed, and a tip to keep in mind. Now, I will say that I don't like to haggle in under or less developed countries, because I feel like they sometimes need the money more than I do, and $5 to them means a lot more than $5 to me. But also, I do want to stretch my dollar and buy things from multiple vendors so that I can feel like I'm, I guess, helping out while I'm in the country, and buying locally and supporting the artisans and everything like that. But at the same time, when I was in Ecuador, they asked for reasonable prices. They asked for maybe $5 for a t-shirt, $7 for a scarf. And in Kenya, they started really high. I mean, they would start at $20, $50 and haggle with you lower. And when they start that high, like, unfortunately, I'm not just gonna pay what they're asking for, because again, I want to buy things from more than 2 people. And I mean, I do have a budget. Also, I'm not made of money. I don't have this unlimited travel souvenir budget. So another thing to keep in mind if you go there, just don't be afraid to haggle a little bit. You're not going to insult them. They're used to it. It's just kind of their way of life, especially with tourists. And yeah, just a tip. Tipping. I think this is the last one I'm going to mention. They do have a tipping culture. Like in the United States, we are expected to leave a tip for your meal at a restaurant or things like that. And it's not expected, obviously, in Europe or some of those other countries. But what I noticed is that some people were really like strange about accepting tips. And we went to this one camp, and I forget which one of the 3 it was. But when you arrive, they sit you down and they kind of go over all of the rules and everything. And they did tell us that tipping was okay, and actually that we should tip the staff. So we tipped the staff that carried our bags to our room, like 100 shillings each, $1 each. And then we went to eat in the restaurant, and we tried tipping the waitress, and I think maybe we tipped her too much, because we actually gave her, I think, 2,000 shillings, so $20. So maybe it was too much, but also I don't really know what the prices were because everything was included with my tour. And so the next day we went back, and the manager came over and gave us back the money from the waitress, because I guess she wasn't comfortable taking it or wasn't allowed to, or she told us to put it in the group tip jar, which is what we did. And I think maybe it's because it was too much. I think she maybe would have accepted 100 or 500 shillings, but we gave her 2,000. And so that next day when we were there, and after they gave us the money back, I made sure to look around at what the other tables were doing, especially tables with people who had European accents of some type, because I knew that they weren't used to the tipping culture, and they weren't leaving tips on the table. So we decided that we also weren't going to leave a tip on the table again. But we did save up a bunch of the money, and we put it into the collective staff tipping jar at the end of our stay before we left. Oh, and I know I said that was going to be the last thing, but one more thing that I did really notice is hand washing was really big in Kenya. Now, I remember when I was in elementary school, the teachers used to bring us by the bathroom and tell us to wash our hands before we went to lunch. But that kind of stopped being a thing, especially middle school, high school. It's just not a thing that teachers remind you of in this country, and it's not a habit that people are really into. When I go to work, people go down to the cafeteria and order food and go and eat it, and we don't wash our hands. But they had hand washing stations almost everywhere, and hand washing before and after you eat was super encouraged, which is a really good thing. It was also just surprising for me to see because that's not typical of American culture, and it's just not something I thought about. Yeah, I just wanted to note that. And even when we were in the airport in Nairobi going home, in kind of the food court area, there are kind of portable hand washing stations, kind of like a water fountain in a school, except it's for hand washing. And they're really just everywhere, which is super cool, and I really think that Americans should probably get used to washing their hands a little bit more, and maybe we should have those things around. So anyway, if this was at all helpful, if you've been to Kenya and you had similar or different experiences than I did, definitely don't hesitate to comment below. Again, make sure you subscribe, click the notification bell, give this a big thumbs up, and let me know. Till next time.